good debt and bad debt. There isn't a good or a bad debt. It's who is the debt working for? Is it working for you or working for the bank? And I'm trying to work my way out of these weeds. Think about it. Debt can be your friend. Debt can be something that you use to get ahead, that you use to make money, that you use to leverage. But everybody says debt's bad. You got to be completely out of debt. I'm not disagreeing, but in today's webinar, we're going to dissect good debt, bad debt, how to use debt, how not to use debt, and how to get rid of debt and build wealth while you're doing it. Let's do it. Welcome back, everybody, to another week, another wealth webinar. Today, this is number 2 of a 9-part series that we're doing. We're super excited about this. I know a bunch of you were here last week, and Stephen and the team delivered that. Now, we're going to get a little bit deeper, and each part of this series goes deeper into this. But today, we're going to talk about something that all of you should be very familiar with, hopefully on the right side of it. We're going to talk about debt. We're going to talk about whether debt is good or bad. Think about that. Is debt good or bad? It's really neither, or that's in the eye of the beholder, because it's who is the debt working for that is most important. Think of a bank. You deposit money in a bank. They turn that liability into assets. Those assets are loans they make, right? So that's being on the right side of debt. But there's lots of other ways that you can leverage debt, ways you can use debt. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to take and dissect good debt from bad debt. We're going to show you how to eliminate debt, but not just how to eliminate it and arrive at zero, how to eliminate debt and build wealth through your own debts and expenses. Then what we're going to do is we're going to show you how to use debt to put yourself in a better position, how to use debt to get yourself higher. I just got to call this one out. I watched a Dave Ramsey video that was sent to me the other day. And it wasn't Dave, it was somebody else on his team. And they were going through, and it kind of made me sick because, you know, I know his thing is no debt at all. But I gotta disagree. There are many scenarios where debt can be a really good thing if the debt is working for you. And he had a couple people that he was kind of poking fun of, and they were talking about using equity in their house to pay off their debts, using loans from their 401k to do different things. Like those are good debts if used properly. But we're also going to cover how debt can be used completely wrong, how you can get yourself in trouble, and that is something you must avoid. Before we get into this, I'm going to have Stephen pull up the slides. We are going to be very visual today. Now, I'm going to turn this over to Stephen in a second, but you know, debt really is just a tool. If you really think about what debt is, it is a tool. The only question is who is your tool working for? Good debt, bad debt, and the trade-off hiding inside of every single payoff of your debt. That's what we're going to cover today. And I promise you, for those of you that are on here, you want to learn about retirement and you want to better your situation for retirement, you're here to learn about infinite banking or financial freedom. I know this topic is debt, good debt or bad debt. We're going to cover every one of those topics today. So last night's retirement income webinar we did was because people were asking for that. People are asking for guarantees. People are asking for more about infinite banking, but not just using infinite banking to pay off debt. How do we use infinite banking as a volatility buffer for our retirement? How do we use it to supplement our retirement so we can retire at 50 or 55 before we can access our retirement accounts? See, these are all things that you told us you wanted to learn about. So therefore, we delivered that to you in the form of webinars and this 9-part series. So with this 9-part series, I'm going to turn it over to Stephen and Craig. Take it from there, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Great intro. I'm looking forward to getting you and Craig's insight and experience shared with everybody as we roll through this training today. Like you mentioned, it's a part 2 of a 9-part series. If you missed last week, which was the opening, we talked about how one little change, one little thing that you do with your money can affect everything else and how it creates a ripple effects. But myself, I will be here with you today. Just real quickly, I've been partners with Chris Naugle since 2019. I've been teaching financial education since I was in my mid-20s when I was a financial advisor with Ameriprise Financial. I've been very heavily involved in the real estate investment space, as well as retail real estate. I've owned several businesses over the years and absolutely love the education and consulting side of this business. So I'm super happy to be here. I've had the opportunity to work with thousands of our clients over the last several years, and I love being able to help, especially new people also. So anyone that's new on here, welcome. We love to have you guys. Anybody that comes on each and every single Wednesday, we appreciate you. And I know that this has been a huge financial change for you and your families for the positive. So I know that's why you keep coming back. Craig, just a quick intro, and I'm going to dive into this.
Awesome. Yeah, glad to be here. And similar to what Stephen was talking about, and this goes for pretty much everybody on our team, we're all practitioners of the things we teach. So the concepts, the things you're going to hear about today, I've been doing infinite banking myself for about 19 years, using first lien HELOCs and unlocking equity to build more wealth. So when we talk about debt, what's cool is there is some debt that can help us become, create more cash flow, more wealth in our systems. We can use our policies, we can use our equity. But I'm not going to, ruin the surprise here today, but just want to say we're excited to teach you these things today. We're excited to have you here. And like I said, we've all been using this for years, so we just want to share our experiences and how it's worked out for us. So Stephen, back to you. Let's run through this.
All right, awesome, man. So, what if the goal was never zero debt? I mean, what does that look like? So, one topic almost everybody has an emotional reaction to: debt. Most of us were handed one rule about debt, drilled in since we were kids. All debt is bad, and the finish line is zero. And it feels responsible, it feels safe. But by the end of today, I think you'll see that get to zero as fast as possible is not the whole story. And sometimes it's the exact thing keeping people stuck. See, what we talked about last week, and we're going to continue talking about this week going into the future, a lot of what we're teaching you on these trainings is not only how to do this stuff, why to do it, why it makes sense, and how to implement it, but also to get you to think. Think about your situation. Think about your past. Think about why you've made financial decisions you've made up to this point in your life, where you are financially, and then where you want to get to in the future. And do you need to make any little tweaks, any little changes? And a lot of today is going to be about that concept right there. So we're going to do two things today. First, we're going to redraw the line between good debt and bad debt because they're not the same animal. And second, I'm going to actually teach you the mechanics of paying debt down, the popular methods and the hidden trade-off inside of all of them that no one warns you about. So with that being said, let me show you the belief almost all of us were handed and where it quietly breaks. But before I do that, just a quick reminder, this presentation is for educational purposes, not financial advice. While we are licensed insurance agents and we do keep your fiduciary responsibility in our minds, this presentation is for educational purposes only. So I hope that obliges the attorneys. We good to go from there? All right, let's dive into this, guys. Just having some fun. All right, so Sarah, so I want to give you guys a quick example here. And what we're talking about, all debt is bad, get to zero fast. But what does that really look like? So let's take Sarah. Sarah did everything the rule told her to do. She got intense about her debt. Every spare dollar went right at it to pay it down. Extra on the car payment, extra on the credit cards, extra on the student loan, head down 3 straight years, sacrificing to knock it completely out. And you know what? She almost made it. Watch that green line. See that green line on the screen? Her debt fell and fell, heading for zero. By every measure, she'd been taught she was winning. But look at what else happened along the way. To hit zero that fast, she scraped her checking account down to almost nothing. There was no cushion left. And then what happens? Life happens. Life does what life does. The transmission went out. $3,000 out of nowhere. And with no reserve, where does Sarah have to turn? A brand new credit card at 24% interest. Watch the red line shoot right back to where it was. She spent 3 hard years killing debt, only to be handed worse debt by the first surprise that came along. Sarah didn't fail, the rule failed her. Has anybody ever experienced that in their lives before? Let me know over in the chat box. Have you ever been down this path before? Have you ever been hit with something unexpected that created your debt to go way back up? Chris, Craig, if you guys have any stories?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing some confidence or some people in the chats like, yeah, it's happened to me. It happens to me all the time, and so these things that we're talking about and the things we're told, which is if we follow the traditional, financial advice, it's like throw every dollar you have at your debt. But really, what we're exposing here is you've got absolutely no leeway for anything to go wrong. And as we all know, things go wrong. Things always go wrong. Cars break down. Kids are out on the trampoline. Anyone have a trampoline out there? Because I heard a doctor once say, those are the best things for my business because kids are always breaking ankles and getting hurt and bonking heads. But yeah, there's so many things that can go wrong in life. And if we haven't built a cushion, we're going to drive that debt right back up on that new 24% card.
I
Yeah,
think
so
an important thing with debt to realize is nobody plans on getting in debt and having difficulties paying their debt payments. It's sort of a gradual, slow thing that happens, and it's always stupid things. Something happens, you're out to eat, so you put it on the credit card. You're like and you just we're always making that number crunch in our mind. We're like, okay, at the end of the month, I'm gonna have X, I can pay this, I can afford this. But then, these unforeseens like Craig and like Stephen talked about, when they happen, and by golly, they do. Your car breaks down. Mine just broke down on the way home from Indianapolis. Like we got stranded on the I-71. It was a $2,100 fix. And it made me sick, but you know what? On the credit card. So like when those things happen, you're just like, okay, can I actually pay this credit card off at the end of the month? And if you don't, it rolls. And yes, that's when the piper wins. That's when you got to ask yourself who's your debt working for you? And if you don't pay it off at the end of the month at the right time, exactly the right time, then it's working for the bank or the finance company.
yeah, absolutely. And this example of Sarah here, I mean, this story exposes something that the role never told her, which is being debt free and being secure are not the same thing. We treat them like they're identical. Like the second you hit zero debt, you've arrived. But look at these two people. The first has zero debt and zero reserve. On paper, a success story. In reality, one surprise away from a crisis, exactly like Sarah. The second person still carries a little low cost debt, but they've got real accessible cash sitting there and genuine room to breathe. If the transmission goes, it's a Tuesday, not a catastrophe. Now, ask yourself honestly, who's actually more secure? It's not even close. And here's the punchline. The number on your debt statement cannot tell you which of these two people you are, because the opposite of debt was never wealth. The opposite of debt is just zero. And zero all by itself is not a plan. So if zero isn't the goal, we need a better question about debt and a way to tell one kind from the other. So for most of our lives, the only question we ever asked about debt was, how fast can I get to zero? It's a race and zero is the finish line. But that question can't tell the difference between the debt that's draining you and the debts that's building you. It treats them all the same. So here's the better question, Chris and Craig and everybody watching. I want you to ask it about every single debt you have. Is this dollar of debt costing me or is it paying me? Think about that. Is it costing me or is it paying me? That's it. Not is debt bad, but which way is this particular debt flowing? Because debt itself is not good or bad. It's a tool, like a hammer. A hammer can build a house or break a window. The hammer doesn't care. The debt is the exact same thing. The only real question is which direction it's working, for you or against you. And once you start sorting your debt by that question, everything else changes. Guys want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I do. And I'd like to show this on the board in a little bit, but I'll give you an example. We had a friend of ours who we've done business with for years and years and years come to us the other day, and he said, hey, listen, I have a huge favor. I need to borrow $50,000. He's buying land where he's going to build his new home. but he's got all of his money tied up in real estate deals, of which one of the real estate deals is closing end of September. So he said, I just need this money because all my money's in this deal. I need this money to buy this land, to build the house for my family. I'll take care of building the house. I just need to buy the land before I lose it. But I can collateralize the loan with this piece of property that I'm selling. So you can go on as a lien. So when it closes, you just get paid from the attorney's office, but I get to buy the land and I get to get ahead of that. So like, how would I do that, right? Like, now take me out of the equation and put yourself in there. Now let's just say all your money was tied up too, but you have a home equity line of credit. Like I have a first lien HELOC on my house, which we use velocity banking to knock that thing down. So I have easily 50,000 there. And the cost for that 50 grand is about I think I can't remember what it is. It floats with rates, but let's call it 7.5%. I told him, I said, listen, I'll lend the money. I'll take care of getting the lien done. I'll lend it at 12. So I'm making 12. The cost of my capital is 7.5. But you see, this is where everybody stops. Now that's a good deal because that's a decent spread, right? 7.5 to 12%, still decent. I got the collateral. But here's the thing, and Craig will show this later. Let's just say he was making payments, which he will, but let's say this is long term. He'd be making those 12% payments. Let's say I took those 12% monthly payments and I applied them against that balance on my first lien HELOC. I would be bringing the principal down, which am I really paying 7.5%? Well, over time, if I pay that down, I'm not. My APR goes down because it's simple interest. You see, there's so much more to that equation right there, but that's just one real life example of using debt to build wealth or debt to make a spread like a bank.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go a little deeper on that and kind of sort this out a little bit. Here's the line between when we say good debt versus bad debt. This is what that line kind of looks like. Let's actually teach this. So how to sort your own debt. And here's the key to it all. It is not just the interest rate. It's what the borrowed dollar does after it leaves your hands. Bad debt is debt that costs you. You borrowed to buy something that loses value or simply gets consumed. A dinner, a vacation, a toy financed at 20+%. The thing is gone or shrinking, but the bill lives on. Nothing comes back to you except the payment. That's the debt to hunt down. Now, on the opposite side, good debt is debt that pays you. You borrowed to acquire something that earns or appreciates or keeps you in control. A loan against a cash flowing asset or low rate debt you keep on purpose because your own money is earning more somewhere else than the debt that's costing you. The borrowed dollar comes back with friends. So here's the one line test you can run on every debt you have. Does this borrowed dollar bring back more than it cost me? If yes, it might be a tool worth keeping. If no, it's a leak that's worth closing. Same statement, two completely different animals.
So, Stephen, I've got a question for you. Let's say you've got a mortgage and you want to eventually get rid of that mortgage so you can retire. Do you think it's a good idea to let's say you've got $500 extra, that's all you have extra in your cash flow. Do you think it's a good idea to just throw that at your mortgage and get that thing out of here a little bit sooner?
That's a fantastic, fantastic question, Craig. We do get that all the time. And I have that conversation I know so many people that are like, I just want to get my mortgage paid off. I need to get my mortgage paid down. I want to get rid of that. Then I won't have any debt. But it's exactly what we're talking about right now. So there's a lot that goes into that, right, Craig? And we can illustrate this and show this using the BYOB vault. But we want to ask ourselves some questions when it comes to our mortgage specifically. What is the interest rate on that mortgage? How long have I had that mortgage? How long do I plan on keeping that mortgage without refinancing it or something else? If I do pay down that mortgage, now I have that equity built up. Well, now what? There's all these different questions that are going to go into the overall financial strategy. But how do you respond to it, Craig?
Well, like you said, there's so many different aspects to look at, and one of the big things that I make decisions on in these boxes is when I'm paying something off or I'm putting money somewhere, it's that opportunity cost. So this dollar is going to go somewhere. Do I lose control of that dollar? So some of the challenges we have is if we do prepay mortgages, we're losing some of that liquidity unless we can go out and get a HELOC. But what if my credit score is bad? What if I don't have the ability to get that HELOC? So we may want to just rethink some of that. So even in this bad debt, good debt, sometimes it comes down to, does it make sense to pay this thing off, or should I put this into another asset that at some point I could pay it off if I wanted to? So the point I'm making is we want to really think about who has control of that dollar as soon as we do something with it. Do we still have control of that dollar, or do we lose control of that dollar?
Yeah, I mean, if you just think about it, if I'm paying my mortgage down, great, my mortgage is going to be paid off. But what happened to all those extra dollars I paid in to do that? What else could I have done with those dollars? Could those dollars have gone out there and produced more dollars for me that I then used to pay that mortgage down if that was still my ultimate goal? Once is paid off, now it's locked in. We say it all the time. It's locked in your 2x4s. I mean, if you own a home and you look around, oh, I have all this equity in my home or my more. Okay, great. But now what? What next? What do you do? And so it's a great example and something to think about. I mean, how many of you on here right now have a mortgage? How many of you are trying to pay that mortgage off faster? If so, have you ever thought about this stuff before? Have you ever thought about those after effects, those ripples? All right, cool. So with that, so let's hold this test in mind because now that we get to the part everyone actually wants, which is, paying it down. So the part everyone came for, presumably here, is actually paying debt down. So there are two proven methods, and I want you to know both because they both win at different things. And again, this goes back to thinking, your situation. What's this look like? So start writing this stuff down, guys, if you haven't already. Let's use three real debts, though, for this example. An $800 medical bill at 0%, a $5,000 credit card at 23% annual APR, and an $18,000 car loan at 6%. So method one is the avalanche. You attack the highest interest rate first, regardless of the balance. So here it's the card at 23%, then the car at 6, and then the medical loan at 0. The avalanche wins on math, pure and simple. It pays the least total interest. If you're a spreadsheet person, this is your method. Now, method two is what we call the snowball. You attack the smallest balance first, regardless of the rate. So you knock out that $800 medical bill fast, then the credit card, and then the car note. The snowball is worse on paper. You'll pay a little more interest, but it wins on momentum. That first debt disappearing in a few weeks gives you a jolt of motivation that then keeps you going and motivates you. And here's the honest truth that most gurus aren't going to tell you. The difference in dollars between these two methods usually is a lot smaller than most people think. The best method is not the mathematically perfect one always. It's the one you'll actually stick with that you'll actually be able to finish. Craig, you deal with people all the time creating debt plans and debt blasters and helping people pay off. You have these conversations. What does that look like in real life with our clients?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely start here. We get the debts organized, similar to what Steven's talking about. And the first thing I typically want to know is, what is the order of debt we want to pay things off in? And as Steven mentioned, the avalanche, snowball, cash flow index, they're typically all pretty similar, but there's usually one that's pulling ahead in on the math in terms of maybe it's a little faster, maybe the interest cost is a little lower. So if you're really drilling into the efficiency, we might want to do the avalanche or snowball or cash flow index, which one's first. But the next step we want to look at is, how are you approaching this debt? So let's just say, for example, you had a credit card of $5,000 and you happen to be putting $800 a month towards it. Is there a better way where maybe we pay the minimum on that card and we do something else with that money to help? We're not going to, talk about the whole strategy just yet, but are you overpaying any debts? Could we take some of that and do something else with it? So these are some of the discussions we'll have. But the next step is, what are some tools we could use to bolt on to this strategy, such as, has anyone here heard of velocity banking? If you have, just put I in the chat. Just kind of curious if anyone's familiar with the velocity banking strategies. It's a way to use lines of credit to where you can take chunks of money out of those lines of credit, whether it's a HELOC or personal line of credit, and throw that at the debt. And yes, Christy Van does a lot of teaching on that. We also can show you strategies where we're using our own infinite banking systems, and we'll talk more about that later. But these are strategies on how we can get out of debt faster or get out of debt and still build wealth at the same time. Because as Stephen, I think a couple of slides ago, you were talking about our goal is not to end up at zero debt and have nothing in our pocket. So we're trying to look at how do we put you into a more efficient system where we can gain control of some of that money. We can still pay down the debts, but not lose the liquidity and the control. So anyway, those are just some of the things we work through when we're having strategy calls.
Hey, Craig, I want to use this as an example to hit on Carrie Bennett's question, because it's a perfect tie-in to this. And I'll just read it out because it's going to kind of take a little bit of thinking. Uh, Recently married, my husband has had his house, the house that they live in, for 30 years. He has a $229,000 mortgage, I assume a 30-year mortgage on it now, including the escrow built into his payment. The payment is approximately $1,200 a month. The house across the street 6 months ago sold for 350, and a week ago a house next door sold for 660,000. We want to pay the mortgage off and use some of the equity to move forward on with things, and his mortgage is about 3%. So this is like it almost seems fake because this is the perfect case study. I mean, too perfect. You've got a mortgage of 229 at 3%. Most people would be like, oh, you got one of those good mortgages. No, you don't. You're still paying the boatload of that money in the first 10 years to the bank in interest. So Carrie, like the simple answer, we need to kind of get on a call. And folks, if any of you want to book a call, it's super easy. You just give us a call at 866-329-BYOB, or we'll put the link up. You can book a call. But Carrie, I would suggest like booking a call with us, because the thing that really would be a super simple fix, why I said it's the perfect case study, would be a first lien HELOC. Now, I have one I mentioned a second ago. But a first lien HELOC, what it would do, and we have a great source, Harrison George, Bank CMG, they would redo your entire mortgage. So the first lien HELOC, just as it sounds, would take over the current mortgage of 229. It would then give you access to whatever equity you have in the house. Now, I can't really pinpoint that because they'd have to do an appraisal, but if one sold for 660, one sold for 350, you owe 229, you can kind of do the math. 80% of some variation of that difference would be what you would get. And then now you got the equity, right? If I'm not mistaken, Carrie, you're the one that has the restaurant and bar I saw earlier, something, I can't remember exactly what it was, but you were looking to build a new one. So that's going to give you equity to do a lot of other things. And the other thing you're going to have to really do, and this is where mathematics makes all the sense in the world. If I just said, hey, this first lien HELOC is 7%, and you've got a 3% 30-year mortgage right now on the house, like you would be like, no way I'm going to 7% for 3. That's what most people think. But when you run the math, what you will probably find, and I can't promise this, but you will find that the 7%, doing it the proper way, and there are some rules of engagement, not complicated, just the system, that 7% would end up being significantly less than what you end up paying on that 3% mortgage. So, and it really comes down to how you use the money and using that equity in the right way, and then taking back the money you're giving away by using your equity to build this new restaurant or do something else. So these are the things that you really need to factor in. But I think that's great. Craig, I'm going to just kind of shut up and let you kick in on this because you're really good with this stuff.
Yeah, and you know, she may look at I don't know where they are in that mortgage. I know they've been there for 30 years, but is the 3% mortgage something new? Because you might be at that point in the amortization schedule where you're still paying a high volume of interest. So there's some different strategies we may look at. The first lien HELOC is a great tool, cracks open a lot of the equity, puts you in control. But you may look at a second lien. It just really depends on what you're after and how the math works out. But yeah, it looks like you've got a fair amount of equity there to work with. And whether the first lien HELOC or second lien HELOC is the best fit, we'd have to run the numbers for you and take a look at it. But I would definitely do some research on that. So taking it a step further, I looked back in the comments and you had mentioned you have a country dance bar, and looking for some liquidity there to build out a new location. So this is where you've got a business with needs for capital. You personally have resources in your equity. So what you could do is if you crack that open, whether it's first lien, second lien, crack that open, build a promissory note, loan that money to your business. Now you're the bank for that business, build your new location. You're in full control of how and when to pay that back. And once that new location starts cash flowing, you can bring that back and start making payments into your HELOC to recoup that. So it's no different than going to a bank. It's just that now you're the bank. You're using your equity to fund that project. So that could be a perfect use case for you. All right. So it looks like we had carry out a lot of questions. Or I think we received
And Craig, they were asking it'd be great to have software program that you can kind of play with and show the what ifs and things like that. So here towards the second half of this
yeah.
webinar today, we can pull the vault up, yeah?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
how that
We'll pull
works.
the vault up and show some of that. And what the vault will do, it has a program in it called Debt Blaster, and it's going to run all your debts to figure out one, what's the proper order, and then if you are doing any sort of velocity banking, how does that work and interact with your debt? And then if you are implementing what we teach, which is the infinite banking concept system, process, how does that work with your debt? And we can run all those numbers and put a plan together that not only works for you now, but works for you in the future.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Yeah, we'll get to that here in a little bit then. So back to this debt presentation here. Talking about these two different types of methods, they both do share one blind spot though, and it's that exact one that got Sarah that we were talking about earlier. And that's, what neither the avalanche nor the snowball will ever tell you, Craig, is the blind spot they both share. And look at what both methods actually do with your money. They take every spare dollar you have and they send it out the door permanently to a lender. And that dollar is never coming back. Now connect that to what we learned last week. Every financial decision has a second order effect. The faster you fire your cash at debt, the less liquidity and control you're keeping for yourself. And if you push it all the way to zero debt, but also zero reserve, watch the loop on the screen. You pay to zero, you have no reserve, a surprise hits because it always does, and the only place to turn is new debt, usually at a worse rate than what you just paid off. You didn't remove the risk, you just moved it and made it more expensive. That is the exact trap that Sarah fell into. Killing your debt with your very last dollar feels like victory right up until the transmission blows. So the fix isn't to stop paying debt down, it's to pay it down without stripping yourself bare. So to be clear, the fix is not stop paying off debt. Paying off bad debt is good. The fix is to do it in a smarter order so you never leave yourself one surprise away from square one. 4 steps. Step one, sort it. Run every debt through today's test. Is it costing me or is it paying me? Pay attention, guys. I want you to write this stuff down and be doing this. Remember, we're not just learning, we're implementing here. Action is what makes people successful. So, step one, sort it. Run every debt through today's test. Is it costing me or is it paying me? Separate the bad debt from the good and aim your energy at the bad debt. Step two, and this is the one Sarah skipped, keep a reserve you control. Before you go scorched earth on debt, park an accessible cushion of cash first. Not a fortune, just enough that the next surprise gets paid from your reserve instead of a new credit card. This one step would have saved Sarah 3 years of backsliding. Step number three, now kill the high cost bad debt. Use avalanche or snowball, whichever you'll actually finish go get it. Step four, judge your good debt by the spread. If a debt costs you 6%, but that same money is earning or protecting more than 6% somewhere else, then rushing to pay it off early might actually cost you. Keeping it on purpose can be the wealthier move. That's not reckless. That's using debt as the tool that it is. So notice what step four really means. A debt decision was never just about the debt. A debt decision isn't just about that debt. Watch what happens when you send an extra $1,000 at your mortgage, for example. Yes, your debt went down. That's the first order effect, the one everybody sees and feels good about. But look at the wheel. You also just changed your cash flow. You changed your liquidity. That thousand's not available anymore. You may have changed your borrowing capacity and even your taxes, one debt decision rippling across 4 or 5 different areas all at once. That's why debt sits right here in the connected system, wired to everything else. And it's why the best debt plan is almost never the fastest one. The best debt plan is the one that strengthens the entire financial system. That lowers what's costing you while protecting your cash flow, your liquidity, and your control. Speed is easy to measure. Strength is what actually makes you wealthy. Anything you want to add there, Craig?
Now, I think that what really stands out to me in this approach is everybody's going to have a different situation, right? Everyone's going to have different sets of assets, savings accounts, margin accounts with stocks, home equity. Some people may not have any of it, but what's central is thinking about how each of our dollars go to work to either help us build wealth, reduce debt. And so there's thinking that needs to be done. And it's really hard just to say, always do this. And that's why we have to look at all these different buckets, right, Stephen? So when we have strategy calls, we have to look at the cash flow. What does your current cash flow look like? What do you have in terms of liquidity? Because just like the example of Sarah, if we just work on paying off debt, the next emergency comes, we're just going to go further into debt because we don't have the resources to take care of that emergency. So all of these things need to be considered. And that's really one of the most important things I think if everyone can walk away, we need to consider all of these buckets as we're putting plans together.
Yeah, I think one of the most challenging parts of being an investor, being a good steward of your money, being financially responsible, call it what you will. I think one of the hardest parts about that is just emotion. We're all human beings. We all have a lot of emotion, and we all tend to make financial decisions with emotion. Especially women. I mean, it's a well-known thing. Ladies typically act in a more emotional way, and I see it happen all the time. And so, when this thing right here says the best debt plan is the one that strengthens the entire system, not the one that's fastest, that makes us feel good, that gives us that positive emotion. It's the one that actually makes sense in the overall picture. And that's why I think it's so important to have somebody that you could talk to this stuff about. Because, if you only work, if you just, sit down with your spouse, for example, or a loved one, a partner, something like that, even a business partner, if you're looking at the business side of things, and you start going through money, you start going through finances, you start going through your debts, it could get into that real emotional, like, what's the right way to do it? What should we do? Like that kind of thing. But if we can take a step back and have a financial professional, have one of our money mentors, for example, somebody like Craig that can have this conversation with you, that can take it all in, he's completely disconnected emotionally from your financial decisions, but he can take it all. He can run it through our software. He can create these illustrations. He can create these debt plans for you and sit down and say, okay, here's exactly what we can do. Here's option one. Here's option two. Here's option three. Here's the pros and cons for each one of those. I understand this one might make you feel better, but this one might be the better decision in the long run. When you have somebody that's there with you and can have these conversations, it just makes all the difference in the world. Is that fair to say, Craig? Do you get what I mean by that?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say, and One of the things I was just kind of thinking, can we go back one slide? Because I think there's a point that I want to talk through with the group. Because I think there's probably some people on here that when you got to step two, keep a reserve in your control. And I have these conversations. I meet with some people where they're like, well, where am I going to get this reserve? Every dollar I have is going to groceries, kids' activities, and my debts. And how am I going to build a reserve? And sometimes, and to Stephen's point, sometimes it's having somebody else look at your situation. We may see things that you don't. We may find out that, oh, well, you're running a very tight cash flow system here, but why in the world are you throwing so much extra money at this particular debt when we could use maybe some of that as from the reserves, or we could do something else with it? I don't know if that's always the answer for your particular situation, but the point is, you may look at things like, how do I keep a reserve? And then kind of bring that in with Steven's point of just having somebody else looking at your situation. We can see things that maybe you didn't even think about. What resources do you have? Do you have a 401k? Could we potentially leverage some of that? Let's run the math. Let's test it. Because at the end of the day, if it is beneficial, let's use it. If it isn't, let's not. So there's a lot of different things we can zig and zag on, but I think we want to keep to these premises, but don't get frustrated if you look at one of these and go, well, I can't do that. I can't do number two. You might be able to. Let's discuss it. Let's talk about it and figure out if there's a way for you to be able to do that. And guess what? Even if you can't do it now, maybe you can do it in 3 months. Maybe you can do it in 6 months. So having a plan to get you to that next step is oftentimes the biggest step you can make.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said, Craig. So let's name the real shift that happened in your head today. Tell me if you agree with this. So plenty of people with balances are building real wealth, and you are not automatically safe just because you paid everything off. Control isn't a finish line you wait years to cross. It's a decision you get to make right away. Does that make sense, Craig?
Yeah. So it's never about being debt free. And I mean, that's the biggest thing I think we teach is about being in control of that money. And that drives a lot of the decisions that we make. I mean, sometimes, I mean, I guess at the end of the day, would you be okay if your debt pay down strategy took a little more time, but you kept control and you built wealth with it? I'd be okay with that. And here's maybe an underlying thing that's not being said that I think we should say. How many of us think long term? I know it's a tough thing, but we're not really we don't live in a long-term thinking world. Everything is immediate. We get everything we want. We've got our cell phones. We can find any movie we want to watch. We're just kind of in this instant world. But what we're talking about is thinking longer term. Let's think about the future. Let's build things that are going to put us in a better position in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years from now. So all of those things are the things that we want to talk about when it comes to being debt free as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Craig, this raises one last kind of irresistible question about your
Oh,
debt payments, which,
Irresistible.
think about your loan
I,
payments.
I was all excited about this. It's irresistible. I want to know more about this.
But think about your loan payments right now. So every one of them flows out to somebody else's institution, and the interest inside them is that institution's profit forever. It leaves your world and never comes home. So imagine this, paying off your debt in a way where the payments rebuild your own capital instead of the bank's. Same discipline, same payment, completely different destination. And just a little hint, what is the theme of all of this? Becoming your own banker, being and doing what the banks do, right? So this is where we can start kind of transitioning over and using the whiteboard. We're going to do this in a minute because this is exactly what the infinite banking concept is built on when it comes to paying off debt. Instead of making the banks and financial institutions wealthy, keeping all of that interest that was bled out in our financial lives, keeping it in our own financial systems. And that's where this stuff starts to get very, very exciting. So if you want to see how that works for your own debt, here's the next step. Today we changed the question from how fast can I get to zero to is my debt costing me or paying me? And did I keep control? That's the thinking, and it's universal. But your debts are yours, your rates, your balances, your goals. So the next step, if it's useful, is to sit down and run your own debts through this lens. Which ones to attack first? Which ones might actually be worth keeping? And how much of a reserve to protect before you go all in? That's a personal conversation, not a purchase. No pressure, no products pushed on you, just your own picture made clearer. And to be clear, nothing today was financial advice. It's education. If you've got real debt questions, talk them through with a professional who can see your whole situation. And that's exactly what our money mentors are for. So before you go, the one line I hope you carry out of here with you today, before we go over to the whiteboard and showing some real world examples, is this. I'll leave you with one line I hope you carry out. Debt isn't good or bad. It's a tool. And the only question that ever mattered is who it's working for. So you don't have to be afraid of it. Fear makes people do dumb things with money, motion. And you don't have to race it blindly to zero, scraping yourself bare in the process. You have to aim it, point it at the things that pay you, close down the things that cost you, and always keep enough control to handle whatever life throws at you next. Because the goal, as it turns out, was never zero. The goal was all about control. Now, yep. What questions? Let's get into it, guys.
Yeah, there's one really good one that came that I think is good, and we can even whiteboard this. Craig, I would need some help from you, but this would be kind of cool to do. Virginia said, I recently needed to put a new roof on my house. Am I right that it is better to use my own private banking system rather than to use my HELOC to pay for it? So my answer was just this, yes, for sure, but make sure you structure the loan from your private banking system the same as the bank would have structured the loan for the HELOC. In other words, calculate or have us calculate the same payment you would pay to the HELOC and then pay that back to your banking system. Do you guys both agree with that?
Yeah, it's definitely that's the whole premise of infinite banking is we want to pay our system back the same we would pay another bank. Now, in terms of using, I would imagine when she says her bank, she's talking about her specially designed whole life policies.
I assume that is face value.
Yeah, because I know Virginia's got some of those specially designed whole life policies in her family, and so then the question is, should I use tool one or tool two? And part of that is I would need to run the numbers personally just to see. We're typically talking about depends on your HELOC. How much debt do you have in your HELOC? What's your available line of credit? What's your rates? What's your income? How much you're running through there? So a lot of that stuff can skew the answer.
Yeah, love it. So I don't know. I mean, that is definitely a really good question. But Virginia, like, here's one thing I would say to that is, when you're structuring the loan to your private banking system, Vault can do this. We may even have time today to kind of model something kind of fun. I'll do it on the whiteboard. You're going to want to make sure, and you're in control of this. I want to be clear. Let's say your HELOC's 7%, and you calculate just what a loan for, I don't know how much the roof would be, but let's call it 20 grand. $20,000 roof, you would borrow it from the HELOC at 7%. So we could tell you exactly what that payment is. You can use bankrate.com. What I would suggest is literally pay that exact payment back to your private banking system, especially designed whole life, if you use your banking system to pay for the roof. Now, here's the cool part. If you did it for your HELOC, that's your payment. No ifs, no ands, no buts about it. If you don't make that payment, you're in default. They got penalties, fees, who knows what else happens. You do it from your own private banking system and you decide to pay your private banking system back the same amount, okay? And then something happens, the roof goes, and then all of a sudden your main sewer line goes. These things happen in threes. So then all of a sudden that's 10 more grand. Let's say now you needed to come up with more money for that, and you had to reduce the payment you were making on the roof. You can do that from your private banking system because you're in control. So that's the biggest thing. Again, we always talk about being in control and having those flexibilities. When you use the bank's vehicles or the bank's money, you are not in control. When you use your own private banking system, you are in control. And that's a luxury of how the insurance companies operate compared to how banks operate. That was a mouthful. I love Gloria's chat over there. I'm too old for the insurance infinite banking, but I do have 190 or 109 in a lazy account. Now, Gloria, there'd be more to this conversation, but there's probably definitely some things we should talk about to get that lazy account working for you, because we don't like lazy accounts, and your money should not be working for the bank. It should be working for you. And there are ways to do that. I mean, right now, just in the guaranteed forefront, you can get between 5 and 6.7%, if I'm speaking correctly, guaranteed on that money. If it's truly lazy money, that might not be a bad thing to book a call about. All right, Craig, where do we want to go from there?
So we have a couple options. I don't know if you want to give a quick explanation of infinite banking, how the money moves.
Sure.
I'm happy to jump into the vault, show some different scenarios.
Well, let's start
Uh,
with infinite banking and then show scenarios. And then,
okay,
we'll kind of wrap up if we have time, and we'll do that roof one if you're up for the challenge.
sure. Yeah,
All
let's
right.
do it.
So I just had this little drawing done here. When we're talking about the private banking system, this is more just the process, right? Infinite banking. So we all know infinite banking is a process, the process of taking back the banking functions in your life. In other words, instead of putting the bank in control and giving the bank all your money, principal, and interest, you're taking control of those banking functions. And that all starts with changing one thing, and that is where your money goes first. Now, does your money, a lot of people ask me this, does your money, in order to do infinite banking, have to go into a specially designed and engineered whole life policy? The answer is no. The infinite banking concept is literally a process. It has nothing to do with a product. However, with lots of mathematical testing and tens of thousands, or maybe even more, probably hundreds of thousands of times where this has been run over and over and compared, what they have found is that by using, and I want to preface, a specially designed whole life insurance policy, not a normal off-the-shelf whole life, but a specially designed whole life policy that is designed for high early cash value. And just to throw one in Dave Ramsey's face, these policies, Dave, give immediate access to the cash value in the first 30 days. Contrary to what you and your cronies always say about it taking 2 years, it is immediate. And we never have one person that can immediately access their cash value. So Dave Ramsey, eat your heart out. Please come on to our trainings and learn how this works instead of thinking you know what you don't know. Anyway, back to the regular scheduled show. The whole life insurance policy has some very unique features that have been found to be incredibly advantageous for your own banking system. Let's just hit on a couple of those. Number one, they have guaranteed interest in the contract. It never changes. So that interest with the carriers we have right now can be 2, it can be 3, and the highest we have is 3.75 guaranteed. Now, don't get hung up on the guarantee, because that's not the only money you make. That's just guaranteed. You can never get less than that for the rest of your life, okay? Unlike a bank where they might be paying you 3 today, but if worse drops interest rates, you're going along for the ride. These policies have a guaranteed interest rate that never changes. Second to that, they're mutual. They're mutually owned life insurance companies, which means they pay a dividend every year. They have never missed one. These dividends are not guaranteed, but again, I said they've never missed one. And every company we work with has been around longer than 140 years. Okay, they've never missed a dividend for 140 years. That means not during the Great Depression, not during the Great Recession, not during COVID, never. So the dividend and the interest makes up what they call the dividend crediting rate. So this is the number you focus on. It's anywhere between 5.9 and 6.6%, depending on the carrier that we use. That's what your money earns top line. But that's top line, that's gross. Then you have cost of insurance, you have a policy service fee, which is between $50 and $100 a year, and you have our commission. But when we design these policies, we've designed them to reduce our commission by 60 to 90%, so that you have 60 to 90% of your cash value, or your premium deposits, I should say, available immediately. That's how it works. So somebody's got to give so somebody else gets. We give up commission through design, so you have immediate access to cash value. Then there's other benefits, okay? Those benefits are, it's protected against judgments and liens in most states. It grows tax-free if it's designed properly, which we know how to design them, so book a call with us. And there's a death benefit that protects your family in the event of you dying. And how that could be looked at in all these examples is those loans, all those loans would be paid off if you died. You wouldn't leave your family with the burden. All of them are self-completing. But the biggest reason why whole life, and whole life specifically, has been chosen as the most optimum vehicle we call it a machine to use for infinite banking, is this. When we take the money from the policy, we are not taking our cash value. The insurance company is lending us, and I want to be clear about that, they are lending us money from their general account, and they are going in and reducing your death benefit on your policy by the amount of the loan. So if you started with $1 million death benefit, you took a $500,000 loan from your policy, your net death benefit upon death that moment is 500 because you took 500 of your death benefit while you're living. That's how they do it. And because they do it that way, these loans, and I want to be careful on how I say this because people hear only what they want to hear. These loans, the insurance company will never ask for them to be paid back. And that's because they're giving you death benefit. So when you die, they're taking it back. But you don't want to do that because remember, it's a loan from the insurance company and they charge interest on that loan, anywhere between, I think, 4.8 and 6.25, depending on the carrier. So that's the simple interest that they charge. Think of that as the interest like a credit card, interest like a HELOC. It calculates in factors the same way, but there's a unique advantage here. And this is why. Okay, sorry, I'm going a long way around this. When you take the loan from a non-direct recognition company, which are the majority of the ones we use, the insurance company doesn't recognize the loan, which means the insurance company pays you that dividend crediting rate on 100% of the money in your account, your cash value. Nothing is diluted. So you're earning compounding interest on an uninterrupted basis on all of your money while you get to use a large percentage of your money, 60 to 90%, depending on design. Okay. So now you've got that money. That money that you use comes over here and it can be used for anything. So let's use the roof. We'll just pick the roof in there. Over here, we could then, I'm just going to erase all this. We can say we're going to take a roof loan. Okay. It's $20,000. $20,000. And the bank was going to charge us 7%. So we're going to do 7%. Craig, I don't know if you did any of the numbers, but you know what would that interest payment be?
So 7%
of 20,000. Simple interest.
We're doing a policy loan that will be payment will be $377.42 a month.
To the insurance company, or is that the payment we'd make at 7%?
Well, I did a 7% policy loan. The actual policy.
Well, just give me the dollar amount.
377.42.
We'll round up 378. So with this loan, if you had borrowed the 20 grand from your home equity line of credit at 7%, your payment would be 378. So again, let's not make this complicated. Let's just pay our private banking system back at the same interest that you would have paid the bank. But let's just say this insurance company, hypothetically, and I want to make sure I preface, this is not what every insurance company charges, but we have one that's under this. 5% interest is what it costs for you to borrow that 20 grand from your policy. Remember, your policy is earning anywhere between, I don't know, let's just say 5 and 6%. Okay, I'm just going to keep these numbers simple. You're earning that regardless of taking this loan. But to take the loan, the insurance company charges you 5. So you were willing to pay 7 back to the bank, which is $378. So if we just take that $378 that you were going to pay to the HELOC and we put that back into the policy as a loan repayment, so now every month $378 is going back to the policy. Here's the difference. You now have $378 more in your policy every single month, dollar for dollar, because it's a principal repayment. The bank or the insurance company was charging you 5. You're repaying at 7 because that's what a bank would have charged. You are making a 2% spread, just like a bank. Remember, we're trying to be the bank, so we got to do what a bank does. 2% is not what you make. You make that, that's just being smart and using your bank instead of their bank. The other thing that happens is you're still getting the compounding interest on your account. Okay. But there's one other thing that's happening that is often not mentioned and often not realized is that every month $378 is being subtracted from the $20,000. So in the course of 1 year, and I know Craig is doing this and he's going to show it to you in a second because I can just see his little head or his little mind working and his fingers crunching away on his spreadsheet. So just this, in 1 year at that, we would have repaid $4,536. So if we take that minus the 20 grand, that's $15,464. So we're talking 1 year later, you now have $4,536 in your policy's cash value, okay? Because you repaid it back. Dollar for dollar, you did not lose control or liquidity of every payment. If you did it to the bank, you do. But if you do it to your bank, you don't. But the other thing you did, you paid the loan down. So now if the insurance company is charging you 5% interest, they're now charging you 5% interest on a reduced balance of 15,464. So that times 0.05 is $773. Okay, 773 divided into the original loan amount means that you only paid 3.8% interest. You didn't pay the insurance company 5, you paid somewhere closer to 3.8. And Craig will show this to you better, but I'm just doing it quickly because that's the APR. You lost no control. You made the spread. You kept the money. Why would you not use your own banking system? Craig, anything you want to add to that?
No, I was just kind of following along, configuring something in the vault while you were talking, so I can kind of show some of the math on that.
I was just trying to show, like, this is infinite banking that I just showed you.
Yeah.
So, but we just use the roof. What if you use this to pay off your debt? What if you use this to buy a car or pay off an existing car? You can keep going over and over and over again. It's always going to be the same results, but we run the math. So, Craig, let me turn this over to you and I'll shut up, but that's infinite banking.
All right, well, I can run through some different scenarios with debts, and then since you were just talking about the roof, let's jump into that first, and then we'll get into the debt scenarios. All right, so let's just walk through some of what Chris just did on the board. And what we're going to do is we're now in the system we call the vault. If you want to take a look at that, you can go to byobvault.com. And what I'm in right now is what we call our loan officer. And what I want to do is model out a loan from my own banking system or my own specially designed whole life policy. So let's just say, like in Virginia's case, she was going to take a $20,000 loan from her policy, her specially designed whole life policy. And let's just say it's at 5%. That's what the insurance company is going to charge us in interest for the use of that 20,000. Now, while that loan is happening, we're not losing the compounding. And that's one of the things I just wanted to reiterate is we're leveraging that because we're borrowing from the insurance company. We're not actually taking it out of our account. So our money continues to compound and grow. It's a beautiful thing, and I'll show you kind of how that factors in here in a minute. Now, if the interest cost is 5%, I could just come over and say, you know what, I want to structure maybe a loan repayment over 60 months, so that I pay that $20,000 back. That means I'm going to need $377.42 to pay that loan back in full in 5 years, including all the principal and interest. Now, I know for a lot of you that have been involved in infinite banking, you know how the policies work. You're going to know the answer to this. But if my policy loan is charging me 5% interest, am I really paying 5% interest over those 60 months? And if anybody wants to put their vote or their guess in the chat, that would be awesome. Am I paying 5% true or am I paying 5% false for the use of that money? And let's see. Nobody's answered yet. Oh, we got Dottie in there. She's saying false. We have Sakara, false. And you are correct, it is false. Now, why is it false? It's because effectively over that 60 months, we're paying 2.48%. The reason why is the policy loans work a little differently than what you might be interested or what you might know from a bank loan or even a mortgage. It is simple interest, and what we're doing is every payment that we make back to that policy loan is reducing the principal, and then they calculate the interest set to the side. We have one opportunity to pay loan interest in our policy, and that happens at our policy anniversary. So one time a year, we have the ability to pay loan interest. If we choose not to pay it, they'll just add it to our balance and we'll just keep going. I'm not going to go down that rat hole today, but I will tell you I've done the math a million times. It's just better to let that interest roll and keep making your payments. All right, so now we've established what is the base payment that we need to make to pay that $20,000 back to our policy over the 5 years. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up a policy, and I'm just grabbing a random policy here. I have one where we did a dump in where we just funded it with $10,000 right up front. That means 90% of that is accessible within the first 30 days. And then every month I'm putting in 2000. Your design might be completely different. It might be 500 a month. It might be 50,000 dump in. So don't get too caught up on the numbers, but I'm just saying I've got a policy here already built that I'm going to use. So what we're going to do is jump over to this, what we call our personal loan planning, where if I was going to go to a bank and they were going to charge me 7% for the use of their loan, well, then guess what? I'm going to pay my own system. So, Virginia, if you went to the bank and they said, we'll give you a loan for $20,000 at 7%, then go to your policy, take the loan out at 5%, but pay your system back at 7%. We're being honest bankers. The reason we're doing that is we would have paid the bank 7%. So why not pay our system back at 7%? So instead of that 377, we're going to pay 396, or you might even round it up to 400. So now we're paying $400 a month back to our own banking system. Now, there's a few things at work here. Are we going to pay our policy loan off faster than 60 months because we're paying it at 396 versus 377? Well, the answer is yes. We will pay it off faster. So because I'm putting $396 towards that policy loan, I'm going to pay it off much faster than 60 months, which means what do I do with that extra money? What do I do with the money that I need to run back into my system? We're going to put that back in as what we call premiums, which is going to add to our cash value. It's going to increase our death benefit, all these cool things. And so that's the motion of how our money is going to work. But here's some of the fun. If we go down and we can look at some of the math here. If I just started this policy, it may not be at our efficiency break-even points of cash on cash and cumulative returns and all that jazz. But guess what? If I'm borrowing $20,000 from my policy, paying it back at 7%, over that 5 years, I would have paid $2,476 to the insurance company. I would have put in this particular policy, let's say over 5 years, I put in $125,000 of premium deposits. And remember, when I take a loan, I'm not slowing down that compounding or growth. So my policy cash value grew to 127,000. So you might go, well, whoopee, I put 125 in, I got 127. I also had a death benefit I was protected by. But here's why we do this. This is why we teach this. This is why we use it. If I finance that roof with my own system, for every dollar that I financed, I got a dollar back. That's what this recaptured number is mentioning. So I paid 2,400 in interest. I grew about 2,000 some change. I overpaid my policy loan by about $1,285 because remember, I'm paying it back at 7%, not 5. So in this whole system, what we're looking at is I have the ability to get a dollar back for every dollar I financed. Now you might build a policy and would you be okay getting 80 cents of every dollar back? Would you be okay getting 70 cents of every dollar back on your first loan? I would, because I know what's going to happen the next time I use this, in 2 years, 3 years down the road. And this is really in opposition to if Virginia went to the bank and financed this 20,000, she's paying $3,761 plus the principal back. So her family and Virginia lost $23,761. So that's what went out the door. Whereas up here, we were able to keep in control and keep that in our system. So do you see the big difference of what we're talking about in how we're financing this roof project? Now, what I want to do is I want to say the start date of this loan was basically August 12th today, meaning maybe my policy was just in force and I just started using it. What happens if we bump this and we're doing this, we've had a policy and we've had it for 3 or 4, maybe 5 years. So I just bumped the loan start date ahead because what I'm doing is I'm moving further into the policy life cycle where it's more efficient. I just want to show you what happens. We put in 120,000 of premium, but look what we grew to 153,000. The compounding machine is off running. It's going downhill. It's running and it's running. So we still paid the same $2,476 of interest, but look how much we grew. Now we're getting $1.26 back for every dollar we financed. This is why we do infinite banking. We're keeping in control of our money, and we've got this compounding machine while we're leveraging it. I can't think of a better way to build a banking system than this. So, any questions on this, let me know. Otherwise, I want to kind of spend a little time jumping into the debts as well. But hopefully this is making sense, because what we're doing is we're putting capital into our own system, and that system is a specially designed whole life policy. It's going to compound and grow. We can take loans from it, leverage it, pay it back, and just keep doing that throughout our lives. Now, I know a lot of people mention, hey, I'm here because I want to learn some things about retirement strategies. But with all of that said, I do want to jump into some of the debts as well. I was going to touch on the retirement thing. We were just showing how you could take a loan to pay off a roof, or to buy a roof, or to buy a car. It doesn't matter what it is. We're using these systems throughout our working years. We're using it to buy cars. We're using it to pay off debt. We're using it for opportunity funds, emergency funds, all those things. And then guess what? When we get to retirement, we take that capital and we can use it for supplemental retirement income. And Chris has a lot of different videos on that. He just did one. So this is one of those cool um, systems where we can use it throughout our life. We're not just putting the money away like a 401k and it just sits there until we're 65 or 70, whenever we want to start using it. We're using this while it's growing. And then at some point, we're going to transition to using it for supplemental retirement income. So it's really a beautiful system. But with all of that said, if you do have debts, and I know we started the conversation off today about debts, one of the first things we want to do is get those debts classified. And so we want to go through and say, what do we have in terms of credit cards? Maybe we have some medical debt, car loans, whatever your debt profile is, could be mortgages, HELOCs, all that stuff. We want to get this stuff into the vault, and you would simply just go in and add each debt. And once we add our debts, there was a question earlier about, well, is it better to do avalanche, snowball, cash flow index? Well, I don't know, because we have to run your numbers, and there's oftentimes some advantage to doing one versus the other. But once we get your debts inside of the system, we will then show you the most efficient order. Now, think of it this way. Most people, not the people that are with us today, because you're here to learn and you're going to do things differently, but a lot of people that aren't taught how to do money, they'll have a list of debt. And let's say we're paying this personal credit card, and as soon as that $2,500 is paid off and we have the $75 freed up, unfortunately, what most people do is they go out to eat more often, they spend it. And so it's now gone. And all we're saying is step number one, after we get our debts classified, is when that debt gets paid off, that $75 better get added to this next debt, so we keep accelerating and accelerating and accelerating. That's the first thing we want to do. Now, if you don't do that, what I'm going to show you is what I call the no strategy. So if you just pay each debt off one by one, it's going to take you 181 months to pay off that $78,000 of debt. Not only that, but you're adding another $30,000 of interest. And so the banks, the credit card companies, the car loans, the student loans, we're paying $108,000 on that $78,000 of debt. It's going to take us 181 months. If we just do one of these strategies where we do the snowball, avalanche, or cash flow index, and by all means, I'm not saying stop here, I'm just saying this is part of the building of the journey here. But if you just did the avalanche, you would get those debts out of here in 80 months. But we need the discipline to keep taking the previous payment and adding it to the next debt. 181 months versus 80, $30,000 of interest versus 22. So we have efficiency by doing debts this way. We can get out of a debt a lot faster. Now you'll see in some cases, the snowball has a little bit higher interest cost. The cash flow index method has a little higher interest cost. It doesn't really matter which one of these you use. We're just simply pointing out which is the most efficient. As Stephen was sharing earlier, you might want to do the debt snowball so you get that, oh, I got some debts out of my way. I've got some of those smaller balances out of the way. I feel good. That's okay. We're just simply showing you from the math perspective what's the most efficient. Now, what I want to do is introduce, so Chris was kind of showing on the board how we can run money in. This could be some of our savings that we're running into a specially designed whole life policy, taking a loan, throwing it at the debt. So what if we had, and let me just grab a sample policy. I have one here where we're putting in $500 a month. So we're saving $500 a month into a specially designed whole life policy. So what we're going to do is month one, $500 goes in, month two, $500 goes in, month three, and on and on. Now, what we're going to do is every quarter, just because we don't want to do it every month, you can take it every month if you want, but I just say you might as well just take your loans every quarter. So we're going to be putting money into this policy. We're going to take a loan out every quarter. And just like in the velocity banking strategy, we're going to take that lump sum of money and we're going to look at what's the debt at the top of the list. Well, this personal credit card is the first thing on the list. That's where the money is going to get dumped onto first. And if I have so much that I can retire this first debt, then I'm going to add the rest to debt number two. So let's see what it would look like if we leveraged our $500 a month savings towards our debt. So now if we go down to our payoff strategy, what we're going to look at is how long does it take to get rid of those third-party debts? 181 if we do nothing, 80 months if we do the avalanche, and in 56 months, using this infinite banking concept process, we're done with our car loans, our student loans, all the stuff that $78,000 of debt is retired. It's gone. We don't write those checks anymore. What we've done is we've refinanced that into our own banking system where we control it. It's not on our public record. It's not going to impact our credit scores. It doesn't exist. It's in your private system. But here's what we're going to do. We were paying $1,265 to all of these debtors. So we were, paying all that money to all these different people, the visas, the car loans, the hospital for the medical debt. Well, these are no longer here. So we're going to take that $1,265 and we're going to start paying back our policy loans. So we're not using any new money. We're just simply redirecting that check back to our own system. If we do that in 78 months, we not only have all of our third-party debts gone, but we also have our policy loans paid off and our system completely refilled up and recapitalized. Now, at the end of 78 months, we now have $1,265 of cash flow freed up. We have built up $35,771 of cash sitting in our specially designed whole life policy. And I'm going to put a little star here because I'm going to come back to that. And we have $169,000 of death benefit. So the question is, now that we're out of debt, we have $1,265 of extra cash flow, and we have this $35,000 sitting in our whole life policy. Now what do we do? Well, guess what? Just like with Sarah, if her transmission breaks, what is she going to do? She's going to tap into this, go get a new transmission, and then make a payment back to her own system. She's not going to go for that 24% credit card anymore. I think George had mentioned he saw 30, what was it, Chris, 34% credit card someone offered, George Mason.
Yeah, I was really surprised because I didn't even think that was legal. It's 34.99%.
Yeah.
I thought that was usury.
Well, it may be, it's nuts, but what we're trying to get to is free up this cash flow, have some wealth that we built up that we can use for the next car purchase. We can use it for our business. We can use it for whatever you want, but it's way better than ending up at zero, where over here we'd have nothing. We haven't built up any death benefit. We haven't built any cash value. So that's really one of the things we wanted to stress today is we're not talking about just throwing every extra dollar at debt. We're talking about how do we put that into a system where it can compound and grow, leverage it, and then pay it back. That's what we're up to. I'm not going to go into great detail on this today, but we do have the ability to say, well, what if we also have a HELOC or we have a line of credit? Can we also do velocity banking in conjunction to the infinite banking with all of the other things? Absolutely, we can run the math, we can test it, we can see what is the best strategy. So just know I don't want to overwhelm you with a bunch of different scenarios and numbers today, but we do have the ability to bring in infinite banking, velocity banking, and then those snowball, avalanche, or cash flow index strategies and bring them all into one mix. And essentially what we do with this is we collect information about, what kind of income do you have? What are your expenses? Um, what velocity banking tools do you have in context? Do you have a HELOC? Do you have a first lien HELOC? Do you have a second lien HELOC? Sometimes we'll test, does it make sense to get a first lien HELOC if I can get a second lien? Does it make sense mathematically? So we can do all this fun testing, and then we can come down and run the what if. So if I had a HELOC with $50,000 available at 7%, is what I set that one as, does it make sense to use it in the strategy? So we go ahead and activate velocity banking along with our infinite banking, and now we can see all of them together. We can see what does it look like just to do the debt avalanche? What does it look like to do the infinite banking with the debt avalanche? What does it look like to do velocity banking with the debt avalanche? And then this trifecta, this is the if it works, we're basically taking the avalanche, the infinite banking, and the velocity banking, bringing it all together, taking those chunks and throwing it at our debts. Wow, we can get rid of that debt in 18 months. Now, if we do that, we have some debt to pay off in our policy loans, we have some lines of credit to pay back. But this strategy, since we're leveraging our income into the HELOC, we can start to really get fast with the debt pay down. So now we're talking 23 months. So anyway, your numbers could be different. We might find that maybe due to your HELOC, we need to free up some availability in it. But this is what we do in our strategy calls. We put your numbers in here, we run the scenarios, we figure out what's the best way to move the money to make it work with your specific cash flow. So with that said, Chris, were there any questions or anything you wanted me to touch on that we didn't already touch on?
We've been going through, Brian's been speaking to people. I think some people like just need to book a call because they've got scenarios that are already queued up that the vault and kind of like what you just showed can solve. So I think that's the most important takeaway here is, we've covered a lot of ground. We've covered, geez, debts, we've covered HELOCs, we've covered infinite banking, we talked retirement. So I think those are the main things. Financial freedom is wrapped into all of those. But the big thing is if anyone's serious, about the next steps, it just requires taking a call. And we don't charge, I know everyone's like, what's the cost? No cost. Just book the call with us. Let's get into your situation every single call. It is not a sales call. I want to be very clear about that. We are sitting down with you to figure out what your needs and goals are. We're going to run the scenarios. Might take 2 appointments if it's more elaborate. We're going to run the scenarios, run it through the vault, come up with the most efficient way mathematically to solve your problem. And then from there, it's up to you. You can ask us, all right, what's the next step? And then we will go into the next steps of helping you set up whatever it is. Maybe it's annuity structures, maybe it's the infinite banking concepts and your specially designed whole life. I don't know what your needs and goals are, but we have the tools, the knowledge, and the systems to solve the problems for you. With that being said, thanks everybody for joining us for this episode and this part of the 9-part series here on Wealth Webinar. Thank you.